it is insane how these psychiatric drugs have become part of, well, men as well, but young women's identity online. Like if you look through kind of hashtag SSRIs on TikTok, it is so ingrained in their identity. And even when I wrote a piece on SSRIs, you tried to be so nuanced about it and careful. The comments are so visceral because a lot of these young women have fully been convinced they have a chemical imbalance, and view it as a threat if you question any part of that narrative. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying. There was a New York Times piece fairly recently that said that upwards of 50% of women over 45 in the US have struggled to get off or are still on and cannot get off SSRIs. So the mass medication of women from age 14 with birth control, from menopause with psychological medication is just making them miserable, and they're trapped in this cycle of dependency, which only enriches companies that hate them.
Have you heard of PSSD?
No, what's that?
So that's post-SSRI sexual dysfunction.
Right.
Which I've only recently learned about, which is complete sexual dysfunction after SSRIs. And that can be after taking 1 pill or 2 pills. There's all of these young people coming out saying even after stopping them a decade later, they still have symptoms. And I'd heard about it, but I just thought, oh, it's kind of like low libido. But it's like complete genital numbness, complete lack of positive emotion. And it's, according to a lot of these people, it's permanent. It's untreatable. And doctors aren't warning patients of the possibility of it, despite it's been in the records in the US and the UK since 1991.
That's harrowing. There was a piece in The Sun recently that looked into a study where boys that had been prescribed Ritalin were having long-term erectile dysfunction.
Really?
Yeah, and so we're literally sedating ourselves into sterility.
Well, that's scary because there's companies on TikTok who are literally promoting Ritalin. Like there's a company in America called Cerebral. Have you heard of them?
No.
So they pay TikTok influencers to say things like, oh, have you ever felt stressed or easily distracted? Then you might need Ritalin.
Wow.
And Cerebral is actually, I'm pretty sure, facing a lawsuit for over-prescribing stimulant drugs.
That doesn't surprise me, because when I was in the States last month, because location services, your adverts change.
Yeah.
As soon as I went onto Google Podcasts, intercut with my podcast, normally it's like the AA or random Met Police recruitment ads. As soon as those were in America, all pharmaceuticals. And the list of side effects declarations were at twice the speed, but at twice the length of them saying, talk to your doctor about getting this.
In a font that's like tiny.
Yeah, and it's being read out at 1 million miles a minute, but they're having to put all that in to hope that they can predictive programming you into thinking this is the prerequisite for you feeling better.
And there's, a lot of people have said to me, oh, this is just happening in America, but I'm pretty sure there's, if you have anxiety or depression, you have to fill out questionnaires at the doctors here. And I read a book, Sedated, by James Davis, and he mentions how these forms they're filling out are literally written and influenced by pharmaceutical companies, and they're following the DSM, which was influenced by pharmaceutical companies. So, we might not have the adverts on TV, but, they've still got a huge influence in the UK. It's happening here as well. Yeah,
it's very coercive. I mean, most of the medical regulatory boards are funded by the pharmaceutical companies. And so I can speak on a bit of personal experience, actually. I don't really think I've spoken about this before, but when I was 16, I struggled pretty badly with depression. And I wasn't eating very much, so I was, one of the guys that fell into the former category. And because of the strapping nature on mental health services at the time, which has only gotten worse since lockdown and the proliferation of social media, the pressure to take the easy way out rather than go and do any kind of talk therapy, which in and of itself was in a hospital ages away and in a group setting because they were strapped for counsellors and things like that.
Yeah.
They just thought, okay, well, take a pill and see me in the morning. And then you find out that, and this is a recent inquest, I don't know if you saw this, for England and Wales coroner's reports, of where a vast amount of suicides that are medical overdoses use SSRIs as the overdose drug.
Oh my God.
So they're selling you the instrument that is going to make you more likely to OD.
Well, I'm pretty sure as well, SSRIs are used to lower the libido of sex offenders. I'm pretty sure that's the case. And
wow.
A young girl who had PSSD was telling me about this. Like, they know that it can cause low libido to the point of sexual dysfunction, and yet you go on TikTok and girls are talking about it like it's like they're putting them in like sweets dispensers and making T-shirts with like Prozac on and phone cases, and you just think how like all of this. I often think all of this mental health awareness campaigns, how much of it has actually been a marketing strategy? Like how much of it is, companies trying to expand their customer base by destigmatizing all of these different illnesses and making us think that it's all about tolerance and mental health awareness. But really, if you look at these girls, something has convinced them so deeply that they have a chemical imbalance or they're depending on drugs. And obviously there are girls that are severely mentally ill who need intervention, but you look at some of the side effects and you just think, how worth it is it? How much do you have to be struggling to be put on these kind of medications? And then you look at the numbers of girls on them, it cannot be that many who are that severely mentally ill, and it's worth all of the risk.
Yeah, it turns this condition into a now axiom of existence that you need continual profitable treatment in order to get along. And the companies, to keep the bottom line, they don't want to ever solve it. It's the same with dating apps. They never want you to get off the dating app and have a healthy relationship.
Of course not.
They want you to stay on the validation carousel.
It's their business model.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so many business models depend on girls and men being lonely, feeling like they're sick, feeling insecure, feeling like they're unlovable. Like all of these negative traits and feelings about yourself just benefit the business model. That is just how it works. And yeah, it's from dating apps to pharmaceutical companies. Like they just have an incentive for us to keep in this cycle of needing constant validation or intervention in some way. But I think unfortunately, for girls, their whole lives, everything they worry about, from their looks to their feelings to their friends, their family, all of it has been commodified in some way and rinsed for profit somehow.
So do you think those various pressures that women are experiencing in adolescence, and as you wrote about for Unheard recently, their prolonged adolescence through their 30s, the sort of Peter Pan syndrome of only thinking about the self, do you think those are the catalysts as to why our generation are struggling to commit, struggling to settle down?
Yeah, I think that, again, companies benefit off of us being like these perpetual teenagers who you kind of think how you think when you're a teenager. You want material comfort and you want convenience and instant gratification, and then you kind of mature out of that, hopefully. But I think now companies benefit when you want to buy more things and consume more things, and you put less emphasis on things outside of the market, like family. All the things Mary Harrington talks about as well, things that are beyond that narrow market-driven vision of success and happiness.
The ring-fence sphere of sentiments.
Yeah. And I think, so many people get caught up in that and think that is where happiness lies. And they get trapped in this prolonged adolescence where they're constantly chasing those kind of instant gratification and personal desires and whatever it is. And I think we need to, especially for young girls and young boys, show them that, the reason that's all being pushed on you as happiness and empowerment and fulfillment is because there's profit in it. There's a lot of money to be made off people who think they're endless teenagers and who are trying to find happiness in constant material goods and the pursuit of pleasure and desires. But I think people don't realise that there's that incentive there. And they think that's what's going to make them happy. But we know from, you look now at record rates of mental illness and disillusionment and nihilism, it's not what's making people happy.
No, so from what you're saying here, it's just sort of clicking, right? There's a causal chain here, much like the professional managerial class that run us. So you go to an institution for education, you go to the institution of the university, then you go on your graduate scheme, then you go in the government, and then you expand the government to keep recruiting more managers. I can see that dependency is fostered in adolescent girls by selling their own insecurities back to them. They get dependent on makeup, on drugs, on social media validation. And then when that dependency is elongated through their fertile and family years, it might be difficult to center your source of validation, if you're quite an insecure person, in just one man who himself might not be nearly as insecure and might not feel purposeful if he's just a trousered monkey working at a desk job. And so they constantly have one foot out the door involuntarily, always seeking validation on social media rather than connecting with one person.
Yeah, and I think, the longer you do that, it's hard to rewire your mind to all of the things that, say, a relationship takes, so sacrifice and compromise and discomfort and, sacrificing your own personal desires and fulfillment and self-expression. It's kind of hard. You think about children who've grown up in a world of just instant gratification, technological convenience, and constantly pushing on them more and more consumerism, to then rewire your mind to commit to someone through thick and thin, and to surrender your ego and, stop caring about your own relentless self-promotion and making yourself marketable online, all of that. I think that's a big shift. And I think, in a way, young people are victims of that because they've grown up with it and then they're missing out on things that are meaningful because of it. And then you have older generations making fun of them for not pursuing what's meaningful, but, it's all they've ever known.
Yeah, the boomer aphorism that, I love my parents. They're really wonderful people, and they've both my parents and my grandparents have very strong marriages that I'd hope to emulate. But whenever a relationship has fallen through, I've been a bit like, oh, I'm not really seeing anyone at the moment.
Yeah.
My dad's always said the repeated meaningless phrase of, you need to kiss a few frogs before you find a princess,
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually, you don't need that meaningless carousel of going through people. It might actually estrange you from depth. And that's the same approach for social media as it is with dating apps, I think, is if you CVify yourself, if you present yourself as some kind of commodity on the human meat market, how do you actually, when you get a match, invest in someone beyond just the transaction? They discourage you from taking things offline, from fostering that relationship.
And, viewing other people as well like a commodity, swiping through, filtering out which type of products you want to see, which type of women you want to see, and the ability to just ghost and block people. I think, the way we find love is treating people like objects in a marketplace, and then we're expected to commit to someone and handle that right. And, I think it's kind of the system's set up against young people pursuing meaningful commitment because we're just not trained to do it. And dating apps in particular, I think, like you said, there's all this kind of age-old advice that you need to have experience and try out different people. But what if that just adds to your mindset of, going through disposing people, treating people like they're replaceable and upgradable, and then when you do find someone meaningful, you don't know how to commit to them properly.
You're not in a place of habit where you've practiced the virtues that make you a good partner either.
Yeah, and you're in a culture that tells you to constantly put your own ego and your own desires first. How do you then surrender that and give yourself to someone else? I think that's hard for young people who've grown up with the constant advice. Put yourself first, and your individual self-actualization is paramount. And then a relationship requires surrendering some of that.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.